Well, welcome back, everyone. Well, we all know that Donald Trump had a guilty verdict just recently, so we're going to invite Dr. Bill Angel in to discuss that and what implications it may or may not have. Welcome, Bill.
Yes, welcome. I think everybody was kind of surprised by the quickness of the verdict. The fact that people were, once the oral arguments were made, I think there was a general session. It was going to take 2 or 3 days, maybe even a week, but they came back within a day. Unanimous on 34 counts against Trump. I mean, that really set a lot of people back.
Yeah, I think so. You know, Democrats, Republicans, you know, both were kind of maybe surprised.
The reactions were different. The Democrats were not chortling. They're not do a victory lap or anything like that. They basically stayed focused on the idea that, well, the rule of law prevailed, and we should be thankful for that. Meanwhile, the Republicans have kind of been unhinged, that's the way I would describe it, in terms of their reaction to the verdict. It shouldn't have happened. It was the Biden Justice Department maneuvering things, and even though it was a state court, that Biden had nothing to do with it. Marco Rubio went as far as to compare it to one of Castro's show trials following the 1960 revolution in Cuba. I mean, you talk about over the top.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of that kind of reaction. Now, of course, they're settling in, and they're threatening to weaponize the Justice Department on their behalf. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, has made attacks on the Justice Department. So, you know, we're kind of in a free fall moment, I guess you should say, in terms of where this will all settle out.
Yeah, now, what do you think about the voters out there, you know? Do you think this guilty verdict even matters? You know, does it matter to obviously for the Democrats, it's going to be one thing, the Republicans, maybe, maybe not, and then the independents as well.
I think it will matter in the long term. I think because I think it's never a good idea to attack the rule of law. I mean, that just is not a good thing. And that's kind of where the Republicans are right now. But also I think generally people will come to realize that Donald Trump, like it or not, is a convicted felon, found guilty by a jury of his peers. And that's essentially, and the case was prosecuted without fear or favor. And those terms were used by Alan Bragg in his post-trial speech. And last time, I remember when I first heard that, it was Sam Ervin, 1973, when the opening of the Watergate trials. In terms of the idea is that we have, as government leaders, we have a duty to prosecute a case without fear or favor.
Yeah.
And that's what happened here. And I think Republicans are on the wrong side of history on this, and eventually ought to come around.
What about you think about Nikki Haley and her voters, you know? Like, do you think that matters to them? Or?
I mean, Republicans, I will give them a little bit of slack here because they're kind of in a tough spot, but it's kind of a spot they placed themselves in because, I mean, Donald Trump is a convicted felon. You can't get around that. But they feel this sense of loyalty, and he shuts people out who dare even voice an ounce of criticism. And so if you want to have a future in the Republican Party, you know, you have to weigh your options.
Right. I've heard just many people talk, you know, just since this happened, that people thought since he was a felon that he wouldn't be able to run. But that's not the case, right?
Well, he can run. He can run.
Yeah.
Certainly he's been convicted in state court for one thing, not in federal court. But also I think there are certain things that may come into play, like, you know, what do you do about the national security briefings? Because those are things where if you are a convicted felon, you can't have access to it.
Oh, really?
So I mean, it's that kind of thing. So how are you going to handle those kind of moments? I think eventually, of course, if he has to get a national security briefing as a nominated candidate. So we'll see how that one plays out.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, about the briefings and whatnot if you're a felon, and you know. But to run, you're more than welcome. Our forefathers didn't say anything about, you know, felonies or anything.
Nothing says you can't run as with a guilty conviction.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, Bill, it's next few months are going to be tremendous in the news. I think.
I ultimately you're right about the independent voters. They'll come around voting probably reluctantly. Young people, African Americans who kind of been soft on Biden may come around, and that may where it will play.
Yeah. Well, Bill, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
You bet.
All right. Well, don't go away because medical news is coming up next.